first we're going to pose it here. What does the word queer mean to you? And how would you describe your own personal queer identity? And since I've been talking now for a minute or so, let's maybe throw it down to the other end. Great.
Sure. Thank you very much. So the word queer for me, I mean, you can look from very different perspective on the word queer, right? You can look from historical reasons where it was used to harm people or insult people. It is also can be considered as something of a political movement. This is what we also see in the last 20 years, that it would become more and more exactly this claim of this movement. And of course, you can use queer as a label for your own identity. I think this is a very nice way to also highlight the fluidity of your own self. I think this is a nice way. For me, the most important meaning is the term used for our community itself, because I think this is a good direction, the right direction to move just from 4 letters or 5 letters as acronyms for a very specific label for sexuality, sexual orientation, or gender identity, more to a very fluid, holistic term. And I think queer perfectly, for me, is a perfect example for it, how we can call our community in the future. And I think this is the way forward, to be also more inclusive in our own community, because we're also facing a lot of those challenges within our community when it's up to discrimination or intolerance.
So I would take that up because inclusivity is actually something that brought us at PROUT at work to redefine how we are communicating about the community. In fact, until last year, we were using this acronym LGBTIQ. And from this year on, we decided to change that and to consistently communicate about queer community, about queer people, about queer diversity. And it was very conscious and strategic decision, I would say, because in fact we did have already many inquiries. Why only LGBTIQ? Because there are so many other letters that could be added to this acronym. And we were really considering and talking about it. It were many talks. And in the end, we decided that we want to really reach everyone and also include everyone. So that is why we see queer not really only as a synonym, but rather like an extended synonym that really means everyone. And also we believe that through using queer as a term, we can reach the society at large in a maybe not so complicated way as before. Because some, even in the community itself, I would say, not everyone really understands what all the letters stand for. I always say with L, G, and B, more or less everyone maybe gets it. But when we start with T, I, Q, it gets complicated. So that is why we decided to go with queer and to be very inclusive. And I would like to maybe talk, this is from PROUT at work perspective, but I would like to add also my personal perspective, because in my personal story, I actually heard about this word maybe 15 years ago. That was the first time when I was confronted with it. And for the very first time, I met a person who was genderqueer. And I was firstly quite overwhelmed because it was a Polish person. I originally come from Poland. And I didn't know what to do, how to talk to this person. I was lost. But it was actually great to meet that person, because later on I started really thinking about this, and I really found that this vocabulary that was given to me here is actually what fits my identity very good. I just didn't have the words to describe how I feel. But from then on, I actually started to identify myself as genderqueer. And with time, talking about the fact that I'm queer, I realized that people were a little bit confused, because when they hear queer, they thought just LGBTIQ, but they didn't really think about gender identity itself. So then I changed to non-binary. And I was doing it for a very long time, until recently, to be honest. I was always saying that I'm non-binary. And finally, I decided, I've heard that somewhere, or I read it somewhere, I don't remember exactly, but the criticism on non-binary as a term was that it basically is used in order to say what we are not, and it doesn't say what we are. So then I decided I'm gonna say what I said at the very beginning. I'm genderqueer, and I'm very happy to be here.
I love it. That's very positive, very good. And you said it, claiming words back that used to be harmful and make them look nice again. Because the umbrella term is a very nice picture for me. Like that basically I hold that umbrella and I welcome everyone next to me. And I hope it's a very big umbrella because we should all fit. But it makes me also feel very good because being that trans actor, the burden, the work, I'm just Brix. I'm very happy and I'm very alive and I'm a dad and I had so many outings in my life and I'm so much more than that adjective I really like, but I don't want to use it because I'm Brix. But queer, for me, is that very colorful umbrella and I like working with it. Like, I use it. And with all the outings I had, like when I was younger, I came out as a lesbian. I was not, but I used it because it was the only word I had. And then I came out again. And today I'm married to my wife. But I like to say that we would have met in whatever way anyway. And so we're happily married, queer with a kid. And I don't like the boundaries, or I like breaking boundaries. And I also like words and queer. You will hear about what I use or what I do with queerness, because I like the Querschnitt and Queerlichkeit. I just like words and I like to reclaim them. So it makes the color of this screen. This is basic. No, you don't see it. We see more colors.
It's very lesbian.
Yeah. I'm holding that queer umbrella for all of us. So, okay.
Very nicely said. I think I have a slightly different perspective than the rest of you because I don't want to be presumptuous, but I think I might be the youngest person on this panel, which means I came into my queer identity very much with the help of the internet, social media, and all those things, and very much with a Americanized perspective. Because obviously we all know that the US is very dominant on most social media sites. So I first encountered the word queer through that context, through the American context, through the Anglophone context, and through social media. I myself also agree that it's a very useful umbrella term that sort of makes away with the discussions of which letters fit in the acronym, how many letters do we want in the acronym, who does it stand for, who does which letter stand for, is the A for ally, asexual, aromantic, who even knows? It doesn't really matter. It's queer. And I also think that it can be a very useful identifier when you don't necessarily want to specifically out yourself. When you just want to say, I am queer. I'm not part of the majority in some aspect, but you don't really get to know which aspect. That is how I find the term very useful. And I also really like the term genderqueer because, as you said, non-binary is sort of a term that says what we are not, whereas genderqueer says, well, my gender is something you don't quite understand. Sexuality-wise, I'm a little more traditional. I'm a lesbian. But But still, I think queer is a very useful term, and I'm glad that it's also being used in German contexts now, because we don't really have that umbrella term in German, which I also think is somewhat problematic, because in my experience, when people encounter English terms, they usually think, wow, that's something that's coming from the outside into our society and we have to fight it, which is not the case. Queer people have existed in Germany for ages. I mean, look at 1920s Berlin. But I think that is a difficulty that we sometimes underestimate. I don't have a solution for it, but I think that is something we should keep in mind.
Yeah, I think my take on queerness, we're just playing with the microphones around. I think my take on queerness is very similar in some ways, but it's because I really came out actually not that long ago. I came out in 2020. I was one of those pandemic trans people. There was a lot of us. Having a mask to cover face stubble is a godsend. Okay. But in general, when I was coming out, queer was also for me the word that was going through social media. It was a very already normalized word for me, which I later came to realize is not necessarily the case for people in older generations. And I just came to understand it to mean being non-normative in regards to gender in some way, whether it's your sexuality, whether it's your gender identity, also your body morphology plays a role. There is your gender expression, and we're taught so much that these things should always align with each other, but there's so much variance. And for me, that's the essence of queer, and being able to self-identifying that and having the right to self-identify that. And just because somebody else doesn't understand it, it doesn't make it less valid. So that's what it means to me. Oh, and the next question about how would I describe myself as in terms of my own queer identity. I am a white American middle-class trans woman lesbian. I use she, they pronouns. In this instance now, it shifts between the context. Right now, at this conference, I'd say it's generally she. I generally use they when I'm in a space where I feel like people automatically understand that just because I'm using they pronouns, that doesn't mean that I'm not a trans woman. Yes, okay. So that would be my take on that. And I think now it's your turn. So the idea is, look, is there anything that you would like to add? Is there any points on our side that you would like to challenge? Feelings you would like to share? Questions you'd like to ask? Microphone's coming on over. And being turned on.
Hi, thank you. So the question is, what does the word queer mean to you? And like when I first heard the term, like I guess in the early 2000s, it was like more like a political term. Like gay was like mainstream gay for me, and queer was something like your political or like left identities, and the term changed over time. My question is, what I got from you on the panel was you started to use the word queer more again. So LGBTIQA+ or whatever, for me is like making people visible, certain groups, and like queer as an umbrella term is more like we're making it a mystery again. So how do you feel makes it, does queer make certain people less visible? Is maybe my question.
Would you be open to extra input from the audience first, or would you like to throw it directly to us? Okay, audience. There's a hand in back.
Hi. Okay. Hi, I'm Tu. My pronouns are she, they. As to your question, I am kind of with Amina on this one, seeing as queer being an umbrella term that does help a lot of us, especially those who are still questioning, because to us it is still a mystery. We just know what we're not. And I think that is why the word queer is still very useful in identifying yourself, but I also believe that you can be more than just one word. So while you can say, I am queer, but you can also specify, which I think I personally do like it, that there is more than just the word queer, and that people should be able to use more words than just the word queer, because as someone who identifies myself as queer, I still had different experiences than, for example, someone who is trans. So saying that we are all queer doesn't mean we all have the same experiences, and it is important that those who do have similar experiences have a way to make that visible and share experiences with each other. That doesn't mean that they are excluding others, but they need their own space as well. So to answer your question, queer can be a term for those who do not want to specify. It can be for those who are questioning themselves. But I also think it can be queer and, that there's, for those who want to, can use it in a dual way, or those who do not wish to say, I am queer, that is also a valid way to represent yourself. If you personally say, no, I am very comfortable with the certain terms, I'm very comfortable with the term lesbian or gay, and I want to use that, that is also absolutely valid.
Maybe, yeah, this is Mike. Yeah, 3. Maybe one thing to add, because I fully agree with that answer as well. I would probably also get in that direction, because I think it's just giving us more opportunities, because you can still be a member of the queer community, but you can still identify yourself as gay, for example, in my case. So I think I'm not losing anything, but what we see over the last probably 20 years, a very fast-paced progression in our community, going from LGB, we had this conversation before, LG, LGB, LGBT. We are moving forward so fast that we are, even within our community, we are losing people, or we're leaving people behind in explaining what is our journey at the moment. And I think this brings to the topic of calling maybe the community in the future more queer than just using these acronyms, needs also explanation to us within the community, but also to the external world to understand where we are heading to and why we're doing it.
And I would like to also add that I am, and we are, I guess, really very aware that there is still necessity to put focus on separate identities, because we are not yet so far that we can basically put it all aside. We do need allyship within, so to say, solidarity, first of all, within a certain pillars, I would say, of our community. That's for sure, because we cannot say that genderqueer people, people who identify as non-binary, has exactly the same experiences that people who are, let's say, intersex, or who are having bisexual sexual orientation. So we do see that. But I think that queer is really helpful in order to push what is very often missing, in my opinion, in the community, which is exactly this solidarity, and not only within certain identities where we support each other because we belong to the same identity, but specifically between the different identities. I feel that although we are preaching to the outside, we do need allyship from people who do not belong to the queer community, but we definitely need also solidarity and allyship within the community. There are so many examples of where there is transphobia within a queer community, where bisexual people are being really ostracized, or intersexuality is absolutely not understood by so many. There is a lacking visibility of so many identities, and certain power dynamics push us into the visibility of just certain identities. So I really feel that when using the word queer, hopefully we can unite more, because divided we fall.
Do we have time? Yeah. I think it's very important to always only talk about you. Like, it's my perspective. But, and I think you said it, and I use my mom again, but sometimes I also like easier words, and they don't mean less. But you said like A stands for So basically, if we have too many letters and they don't really mean anything because A is for like 3 groups, it's also So because is no group or no person is So if we have that umbrella for my mom, that makes it easier, because people start about like making fun about letters, or like that again, because it doesn't matter. Like, that's how people react when they read stuff, and it's like, no, say that word, mean more. Like, sometimes for me, not less is more, but you know what I mean? Like, easy bites, snackable, strong meaning. But yeah, I understand and I agree. Yeah.
Yes, we have some comments. Yes.
As it is even hard for me to ask it in German, that you don't get me wrong, I would like to ask my question in German. Du hast vorhin was gesagt, Joe, das ist hart in mir hängen geblieben, dass diese ganzen Themen immer Negativdefinitionen sind. Also was sind wir nicht, wenn wir sagen, wir sind queer, wir sind etwas nicht. Und versteht mich nicht falsch, ich finde den Begriff super, insbesondere was ihr gerade gesagt habt, diese Solidarität in den Communities selbst ist total wichtig. Aber wie kriegen wir es denn hin, aus den Communities heraus diese Negativdefinition, wir sind nicht so wie ihr Mehrheitsgesellschaft, wie kriegen wir das hin, das nicht zu hart konfrontativ zu machen? Also wir sind nicht ihr. Ne? Das ist ja schon abwertend oder nicht abwertend, ablehnend. Und wenn wir dann an eine Alice Weidel denken, die eben in einem Sommerinterview sagt, ich bin nicht queer, ich bin eine Frau, die mit einer Frau zusammenlebt, dann sehen wir ja direkt schon, wie das Wort queer verwendet wird. Und da hänge ich echt dran. Wie kriegen wir es hin, dieses Wort nicht auch schon wieder zu verbrennen? Weil die Leute, überspitzt gesagt, sich gerade erst an LGBTQ gewöhnt haben.
I'm going to switch into English again for my answer. I think with that, you touched on something that you also shortly mentioned, namely the political dimension of the term queer, because it's not an apolitical term. It is a somewhat loaded term, and it is also a term that separates itself from people such as Alice Weidel. Because yes, the definition of the term has shifted and the political dimension has been very much diminished, but there is still an undertone to the term and to what queer and the queer community means and represents. And I personally don't see that as a necessarily negative thing, because as the other speakers on this panel also said, it is also about solidarity and making space for everyone, and that is just something that is not compatible with certain political ideologies. You cannot be right-wing and say, yes, we make space for everyone and trans people are welcome here. That just does not work. Therefore, I think while the political dimension has been diminished, it is still important, and to me, it is a positive. I can see why it might be seen as a negative, but I think it is also important that queer communities do take a stand in some matters.
Okay, I think we should emphasize also on the point that identity and sexual and romantic attraction are not easy. And I think having different, I think it does not matter if you have different letters or a word, because every person has to find the identity and the belonging and their attraction for themselves. And I think this is also what we should do with heterosexual people or cis people or every person actually, to really question the terms identity and attraction and who are you attracted to, what do you want in life for your life and for your being. And I think then we are having a discussion on actual values and what we have, and this is like getting people closer together, because maybe they also see, okay, maybe I'm also dysphoric in some of my my body parts as a cis person probably, or I never thought about romantic attraction as a concept as such. So I think this is like a very nice discussion also to have with people outside of the community. And maybe this could be a way forward to actually have these discussions.
I think the point here is a bit that identity has a lot to do with distinction. So, and we're coming from that. I was born in the 1970s, and I think we've come quite a way, and it's good to see where we're going. I think Traugott also mentioned it. Imagine organizing a Christopher Street Day in the 1990s with a group of lesbians and gays. This would have been a fight. I think queer has helped us to overcome discrimination and setting us apart as groups in that subgroup. We are all always part of minorities, whatever we do, whether we are queer, whether we are not. And I think we're on a way, we're on a journey, we are not yet there, but it helps us to have a more unified approach and to be less discriminatory amongst each other. And I think that's already quite something we achieved, and we should be proud of it. We will have to take that forward, because I think the ideal at which we are aiming is to live in a world where that doesn't count anymore at all. But if we don't find a label for ourselves, and let's call it a label for a moment, others will put one on us. And we've seen what that means, and we have to fight against tendencies to get back to that place.
I'd say at this point, if somebody does have something to add to this topic, that's okay. We're also, though, definitely going to open up the next questions here. So what does queer allyship look like, and internally amongst each other? And also, if there's anything that you wish that the queer community in general better understood about your personal queerness, or queerness as you see it in general, now's the time to say it and to hear what people think about it.
So maybe my thought on this, on queer allyship, when I first read the question, I thought, well, it's like the allyship itself, so I don't need the queer in front of it, but I do understand the terms of being an ally within our community. And I think for me, it's all about like still being very conscious about your unconscious bias. We are still like dealing with every day, and I'm also facing those like my everyday contact with my team members in my private life as well. And even though I'm part of the queer community, I probably see just a little minority of it at all. So if I look into my private life, it's usually a lot of gay people. There are some lesbians and maybe a handful of trans people, but that's all. So so also from my perspective, I need to broaden my view on the whole community, and also need to be very clear that there are very different views on the world, different views on the identity of your own identity. And for me, it's more like accepting and trying to understand. If you do not understand, try to understand the other's perspective. And I think this all will help us in bringing also more freedom into our own community, and also stopping the hate and discrimination we are facing still today. So I think this is my view.
Well, so I talked a little bit already about it, that it is actually quite an important topic for me personally, because I observed this lack of solidarity within the community. So I do believe that we should focus more and more on this. And as you are saying, I think one of the very important steps would be to basically educate yourself. Because I remember really very vividly, I was also a person who was not able to explain all the letters at some point. And as you also mentioned, we are constantly evolving, and this topic is really evolving. So we do need to either educate ourselves on our own with Google search, or we can ask questions. Of course, only those questions that you think that you would answer yourself. If you feel like maybe not, then go to Google. And so that would be definitely my response, like when it comes to allyship within the community, educating yourself and embracing discomfort. This is what I also say to straight allies, but I do think that we are not different when it comes to queer community. We do need to understand that we will make mistakes. If we want to be strong allies for other identities, we will make mistakes. And it's okay, because this is an opportunity to learn. And even if you don't understand why, for example, someone like me identifies as genderqueer, and what does it mean, that it's like somewhere in between, or even outside of the gender spectrum, even if you cannot wrap your head around it, it's important basically to respect that I identify in this way, and I want to be also addressed in a certain way, like, for example, not using any pronouns in reference to my person, because I am being misgendered on everyday basis, and it's like one could say, oh, no, not a big deal, we read you as a woman, so this is obvious. But this is in my signature. First of all, I'm also talking about this, and each misgendering is like a little sting, but when it happens over and over and over and over again, especially with people that I would assume should know, then it becomes quite a frustrating thing to experience. That is why I would say just try to really understand, ask questions, be aware. If you're making those mistakes and you see them, tell that you just realized that you did that, and how can I make it better? How can I communicate in a better way? So that's my 3 cents to it.
Well, is the microphone on? Okay, wonderful. I think one thing that you said is very important, namely, I don't think we have to understand everything. I think we have to accept everything. There are some queer identities that I don't understand. Like, genuinely, I don't get it. But that doesn't mean those identities aren't important. That doesn't mean those identities don't deserve my respect. And that doesn't mean those people who I meet with those identities don't deserve to be treated in the way they want to be treated. Namely, as a, equal human being. And I think that is something that I would like more of also within queer communities, not just accepting discomfort, but also sometimes accepting that you just don't have to understand everything. And on top of that, I think that is also one reason why the term queer is important to me, because it unifies sexualities and gender. When we look at legal situations, gay people generally are much better off than trans people. And when we look at queer activism, you have many gay people who are sort of like, well, what's the point? I got mine. I can get married. I can adopt kids. It's fine. But meanwhile, it's not actually fine, especially when you look at trans people and the legal situation for them, or if you look at intersex people and how they are still very much medically discriminated. Therefore, I think what is important to me with queer allyship is always looking beside you at other queer people and always being aware that there are still people who are fighting for their rights and who need help in fighting for their rights and advocating for themselves.
Yeah, go ahead.
Does this work?
Mike. Another one's coming to you.
Okay.
Wait, wait, no, now it's
Oh
on.
God, that was
Okay.
very loud. I'm so sorry.
That's fine. Joyous laughter. Good.
Okay. When we talk about allyship, and I'm speaking from a position of not just queer allyship, but as a person of color, personally, I believe that allyship is something that you do not give yourself, but get recognized by the community you're supporting, even if it is inside your own community. And to me, what is really important in allyship is that you give a spotlight and a space to the people you're trying to support and not talk over them. And I also agree a lot with what Joe said about education and being okay with making mistakes, because that is part of learning and is also part of unlearning. Because what I believe is that we have learned a lot of things that might be wrong or have simply changed over a lot of time. So it is often harder to unlearn something than to learn something new. And we should be patient with ourselves and allow ourselves to learn. And if we give others the space as well, it will be easier to have more allies in our communities, because we allow them to make mistakes. We tell them it's fine to be human, and it's okay that you do not totally understand what I am or who I am at this point, because at some point I didn't either. So others should have that time and space as well. I also have another question for Joe, actually. It does say that you prefer no pronouns, or you go by no pronouns. Would you prefer that we always address you by name?
Hello, hello, hello. That's exactly the solution. Just Joe, everywhere. A lot of Joes.
So my question for myself is how do we create allyship? And so we are talking about allyship. It's important, of course, it's important. But many people don't know the word. We have to explain it to them. Also, in our hetero community at work, for example, people come, what's that? So I just think about maybe we as companies have a very special responsibility here, because people don't get in touch in a usual life with the term and with the terms we are using. So we can really use our networks to promote allyship, tell people what's behind it, also what they can do to be good allies. And I think that's something we really have to have in mind, and where we can work maybe all together as well, because that's something we can challenge together.
Yes, I think that's a really actually good kind of segue into the second half quarter of this talk is where are we now and what can we do now? I haven't missed your question. Oh, okay. But in regards to allyship, something sparked in my brain there, which is allyship can take many different forms, but I think a lot of times it comes from the same seed. And that is, first of all, internalizing the idea that there's lots you don't know. There's really lots you do not understand. And I mean, we look around this room, we have a lot of very successful people in this room. A lot of people who pride themselves, including us, let's be real, on knowing what to do, being able to make the right call. And a lot of times in these cases, it's not the case. And by pretending and telling yourself and telling ourselves the story that in fact we do understand what the person standing across from us is going through, then we can cause more harm than good. So I would say this initial seed is checking that feeling inside of being able to say, you know what, actually, this is something I don't understand, and then listening. Because the people who need the support, the people who need you as an ally, very often are disempowered. And if you ask, if you give them the space, they will tell you what they need. And it's also not up to us as the ally to judge whether or not what they say they need is valid or not. Because if we don't understand why they have that need, then our next step is not to say, oh, you don't need that, you're fine. It's to say, oh, I don't understand why you need that. Can you tell me why that's important to you? So I think that is the seed of good allyship, both on the outside and inside our own communities.
Can I just add one thing here? Because I think this is very important. And I think allyship, there is no receipt to being a good ally, right? And I think it's not that you have like a checkbox where you can say, well, if I do this, I'm a good ally. I think it's also like our inner behavior, how you react in situations, how you stand up for your community, how you are, and this was exactly the thing of accepting the other and also showing that you have that acceptance, even though you probably might not understand what's really behind it. And I think all these little things of your behavior, how you feel, this makes you already an ally. So you don't need to have a definition of a checkbox or something.
Yeah, can I? In like the corporate world, I think because the weight is always almost on, like, I would say me or the people who need to talk. Like sometimes like, so you feel something, so let us in on it. And that should never be the case. Like the weight should never be on our shoulders, and they all should be willing to learn. But I mean, as Germans, we're very good at giving feedback in a very not nice way. So again, back to my mom, I started saying, Mom, should we say it again in a different way? So it's a very small step, but think about kindergarten and your corporate or the boss or whoever is that kid in kindergarten, and they want to learn, but they don't know yet. So always treat someone like, or keep in mind, maybe they do have the best interest, but they just don't know what to say. And it can go completely wrong, yes, but maybe next time we try to say, and we all know these meetings where it goes like quiet or like strange because someone said something very wrong. Don't be the quiet one and don't be the German one, but maybe say, should we make this room a bit more an inclusive room, maybe? And just try it. It works for me.
One thing I would like to add is that sometimes you do have to be an ally for people you cannot talk to. Because sometimes you have to advocate for people you cannot quite be sure are there. For example, it is important to create spaces for trans and genderqueer people, even if you don't know if you have any in your company, because that creates a space for people who might already be in your company to come out and feel welcomed within your company. And that is something that we are currently working on at our company. It's not always going well, but it is going. It is developing, and through just starting something and through just opening the door, we have then, after that, we could start conversations with people who then felt more welcome because we opened the door. Because if you are a traditional company who has never even really thought about trans people, genderqueer people, non-binary people, or whatever, or even gay people, then it is very likely that those people will not be out within your company. And so the first step towards allyship is also creating spaces for people you don't know are there. Spaces for people who you cannot really talk to. And even if those spaces are imperfect, even if there are many, many issues, that will then lead to the change we need.
Since we are getting a little bit closer to the end of our time, I think I'd like to throw up these questions here that are on the screen now, and people can grab at any one that might appeal to you. We have, what do you see as the status quo of queer inclusion in the corporate world? What, if you work in the field of inclusion and diversity in the corporate world or business in general, what initiatives have you seen make a real difference? And perhaps a little bit even more interestingly, what no longer makes sense, but did in the past? And, pie in the sky, where are we going? What's the point? The answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42. What's the question? But point is, yes, where do we see the future of queer inclusion in the corporate world? Going to use an old teacher trick here, where just leave an awkward silence and wait for something to percolate up.
We need to sometimes create spaces for people and be allies for people, even though we don't know if we have them in the company, for example. How can we do that without actually taking away a stage and space for them?
That very heavily depends on the company. It very heavily depends on what you do, how your company is structured, if you're, I don't know, an office space or whatever. One thing that can help is to just have a corporate position that is something with diversity. Diversity manager or corporate person who does all the diversity communication for the company like me, so that you have a focus or a person who people know they can come to, a person who people know, okay, that is the expert for stuff like that. So that is a step that one can take, but concrete measures are just very much dependent on the work environment. One small thing that can be done in a lot of places is how can you de-gender a place a little? How can you not force people to out their gender when they go to the bathroom? Is that even possible in your workplace? We talked a little, I'm going to give over to you with the gender-neutral showers, for example.
I have exactly an example for this, because I had this conversation with a former CEO at my previous company when I tried to build this network in Europe and in Germany specifically and asked for budget to do some activities. I got an answer, so, well, Traugott, but where's your problem? So in the company, in the office space, we're 600 people. So kind of everyone knows everyone if you're in the company for 1-2 years. So, and she was like, well, but gays and lesbians don't have a problem here, right? So what do you want to do and why we need to do something? And I was like, well, but there are more people than just openly outed gay and lesbian people. And even probably there, we do have still a lot who are not outed because of critical situations at our workplace. And I also got the example of the trans. So also for trans women, her answer, immediately were well, we don't have trans here. And I was like, well, are you sure? And this was her thought. It gave her a night to sleep. And then she was like, okay, Traugott, you get your money. And I think this is just an example for this. Yeah.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Ja, vielleicht ist es erlaubt, eine Frage in Deutsch zu stellen. Ich akzeptiere auch die Antwort in Englisch. Ich bin einfach nicht so geübt in Englisch, deswegen. Ich möchte ein bisschen provozieren mit der Frage. Wir fragen, was ist Allyship und was sind gute Aktionen? Und ich stelle einfach mal die Frage, ob die Community, die wir Community nennen, wirklich eine ist oder ob vielleicht diese queeren Leute eins gemeinsam haben, dass sich mal geoutet haben. oder wie ich sage, so viel zusammen zu tun haben wie die Patienten einer orthopädischen Praxis. Die einen haben es am Fuß, am Knie, in der Schulter. Wo sind die Spaces, wo sind die Einladungen, wo, ich weiß, ich provoziere jetzt, wo die Gay-Community sagt, Trans-Leute, kommt zu uns, wir lassen uns gerne mal erklären, was die Trans-Themen sind. Wo sind die Einladungen der Lesben, die sagen, wir kommen mal zu euch, schwule Jungs, und lassen uns mal erzählen, was die Topics von euch sind. Provozierend gefragt, sind wir eigentlich eine Community oder sind wir eine Zusammenstellung von Minderheiten?
Yeah, I think the answer lays in between somewhere. From my personal opinion, I try continuously remembering the past. The past, like the first rower in the Christopher Street wearing gay men, they were transgender, and the lesbians supported the gay community in the HIV/AIDS crisis when everybody else abandoned them in the hospitals. So I think we possess the core values of taking care and supporting each other. And it was I think last year I went to a queer community center in my city for a games night with a few gay friends, and I was really surprised about the people there because they weren't gay or lesbians, because I think we can discuss this. We've gone a long way already and we achieved a lot. But the people or the people who summoned there and meet each other and talk to each other were trans people and the rest of the alphabet or the rest of the queer community. So I think, or for me, I took this night, I have to do a lot of work by myself to embrace my allyship and to think of the past to do better in the future. And I think that's everybody in our community which have to do or who has to work on allyship and on the community, that we shift to the community and not to the being together because we share the same queerness. Thank you.
My name is Sonsoles, she, her are my pronouns. I think that's what's fantastic about queer inclusion in the corporate world, is that it's not about us as a community, not about the acronym, it makes it about everyone. Like the whole company has to be talking about the community because all of them have a potential role. They could be allies, they could do something. So it's not about what the lesbians do, what the bisexuals do, it's about us belonging to the same community. And that's what I love so much about the colorful rainbow you were talking about, Brix, is that there's space for everyone. So it's not just for the acronym, it's not just for the community. And of course, the queer acronym and inclusion makes us part of it, but also the allies, also the whole corporate culture, the whole company as part of it. And also us in the world somehow, like we have a corporate social responsibility and what we are in our region, in our cities, and the changes we can cause, the impact we can cause with whatever the company does, the community does, the networks do, and also the corporate social responsibility and diversity and inclusion do it in each company.
So one more, and then we're going to have to wrap it up. So right down here in front with the, yeah.
Hi, everyone. I won't stand up because I'm a little bit shy. So I'm Sophia. I work in the legal sector. I'm D&I manager. And I just wanted to add that the role of a D&I manager creates the space, or our work as D&I manager can create spaces to have this kind of discussion. So together with the networks, diversity networks, we do initiatives or campaigns. I'm not part of the queer community, but so this is my daily job, right? And what I have experienced is that people come to us to have these kind of conversations, and they feel very secure and are very open and tell us things that you don't even want to know, or you don't want to hear about, the marriage, blah, blah, whatever. So I think it's really important to have these roles as D&I managers, and together with the networks, create safe spaces, initiatives, I don't know, like movie evenings, and obviously invite everyone and have these conversations. This is something that I just wanted to add. The other thing is about the challenges. Is it okay if I touch base on the challenges? We are facing actually challenges with the network in regards to engagement. So it feels that we have a network, we have different kind of diversity networks, but it feels that they are not so active anymore like in the past. So we have pride activities or initiatives, but besides that, it's like they became very, it's not against you, I'm talking about the UK network. Oops. So they are not that loud any longer. So we have, for example, our social mobility network. They are much more engaged. So, and from the outside, it is like, okay, we only celebrate, I don't know, Pride Month. We have drag bingo events, or we do fun things together. So this is the queer community. They always do fun things together. And besides that, so this is from the external, from the outside, right? How you perceive it. But I would like to create more like deep conversations about, okay, what does it actually mean to be out at the workplace? And engagement is lacking. So I don't know how it is for you with your networks, and what we can do to make it a little bit more active again or louder again. Thank you.
I mean, I would say all my work lays in that I'm so much more than pride, and I just don't want to do. I love the rainbow, but I don't want to do colorful rainbow activities. Like, I'm just a very boring guy, and sometimes the outside look of queerness, I just have no fun doing. Like, so I think that's what I would say to that. And the picture, imagine a lifeboat, like we are all in a boat, and some people row at different paces, and some people still are assholes, also in our community. So what do we want to do? Some people also stay married. So we're all in this together.
On that note, thank you. We're now at the end of our time, and I think maybe just quickly we'll go across the panel here to see what would be your one short, like one sentence primary takeaway. And I would say, you never know who is standing across from you. So maybe we can make a little extra effort to find out.
Be comfortable with making mistakes, but also be comfortable with apologizing for them.
Yeah, and I like rowing in different paces, but still work as a team.
Solidarity is important.
And I think this is a perfect occasion to discuss this further and hopefully shape our future to the positive even more.